Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye wins greater international support for her administration's North Korea policies during talks in Ulaanbaatar. She also secures deeper trade and investment ties with Mongolia. As discontent swells over the deployment of a U.S. anti-missile defense system to South Korea, the United States grants Korean media outlets access to a THAAD battery in Guam as it attempts to ease concerns. Plus, 3 police officers have been shot dead in Louisiana. 3 more are injured. It comes less than 2 weeks after 5 officers were gunned down in Dallas. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 18th of July. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. President Park Geun-hye will return home this afternoon after attending the ASEM summit and holding bilateral talks in Mongolia. President Park achieved 2 pillars of her policy drive, upping international pressure on North Korea and boosting free trade for the South Korean economy. Our Song Ji-sun has a wrap-up of the president's trip.
President Park Geun-hye's consistent message of denuclearizing North Korea was echoed through the ASEM summit and bilateral talks with Mongolia during her 5-day stay.
북한의 핵 위협 등이 인류의 평화와 안정을 끊임없이 위협하고 있고 우리를 분열시키는 다양한 도전들을 우리를 단합시키는 일치된 목표를 통해 극복하는 것이 무엇보다 중요하다고 생각합니다.
Leaders acknowledged the deeds, condemning Pyongyang's nuclear and missile tests in the strongest terms in the Ulaanbaatar statement. They also showed support for Seoul's initiative for peace and cooperation in Northeast Asia.
Our 2 countries have agreed to cooperate in denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula and ensuring peace and security in the region. We'll continue those efforts on the international stage and within the United Nations.
President Park's message for expanding open trade against the rising trend of trade protectionism was also delivered to other ASEM member nations. Seoul and Ulaanbaatar set the base for free trade through their bilateral summit, agreeing to initiate joint research for the Economic Partnership Agreement, a pact similar to FTA.
It's a preemptive measure setting the ground for investment. We've built an expressway to realize the potential of economic cooperation and trade growth between the 2 countries.
President Park attended a business forum before flying back to Seoul to help link Korean companies with local buyers in Mongolia, saying the 2 countries can further boost growth in a mutually beneficial way. President Park's visit set the groundwork to enter the Mongolian market, a niche market for South Korea and a gateway linking Asia and Europe. Her drive to denuclearize Pyongyang will be helped with support from Mongolia, which also has long-time diplomatic relations with North Korea. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Ulaanbaatar.
Now, in light of President Park Geun-hye's trip to Mongolia, there's extra attention on how her visit may be able to elevate the 2 countries' economic ties. For a closer look into the potential of a country that's dubbed the gateway to Eurasia, Kim Min-ji reports.
Mongolia has the world's 2nd largest copper reserves and the 4th biggest coal deposits. So it should come as little surprise that the mining sector is the main driver of the Mongolian economy, accounting for almost a quarter of the country's GDP. During its transition from a socialist country to a market-driven economy, such resources were a stepping stone to achieve economic growth. Until recently, Mongolia has experienced double-digit growth. It has now somewhat slowed due mainly to a decline in raw material prices, as well as slowing foreign investment. Korea and Mongolia established diplomatic relations in 1990 and have maintained friendly ties in various areas. Bilateral trade stood at a mere $2.7 million in 1990, but surged more than 100-fold to $292 million in 2015. Korea's investment to Mongolia amounted to $240,000 in 1994 and jumped to $38.8 million last year. While growing, the figures pale in comparison to those of neighboring countries like China, Russia, and Japan, all of which have established strategic partnerships with Ulaanbaatar, a notch higher than the comprehensive partnership Korea has with Mongolia. Currently, over 500 Korean companies operate in Mongolia, and conglomerates like Hyosung Group and POSCO Energy have been involved in infrastructure projects. More opportunities could be in the works as Mongolia is pursuing a national project dubbed Transit Mongolia to overcome its landlocked geographic location with a trade, transport, and logistics network. It's also pushing for large-scale infrastructure projects in railway, roads, and terminals over the next 5 years.
Following summit talks, it's expected that investment will expand in the areas discussed, whether that be mining or construction. This will also create more jobs. Korea should also be open to other sectors like ICT.
However, Korea still has to overcome problems such as a lack of information and expensive transportation costs. One solution to this is by boosting economic deals.
Mongolia is also seeking to develop a system for stable and efficient trade and investment. Also, Korea may feel more pressure to establish an economic partnership agreement, as neighboring countries are stepping up interest, and its major rival Japan recently did so.
Experts add the support is needed from the government level by holding regular high-level and summit talks to seek opportunities for Korean companies through partnerships with local firms. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, North Korea has denounced the statement against its nuclear missile programs that was adopted at the Asia-Europe meeting over the weekend. It also slammed a recent trilateral meeting between South Korea, the United States and Japan that condemned the North's provocations. Kwon-swa with the details.
Calling it ridiculous, North Korea hit back against the joint statement adopted at the Asia-Europe meeting summit in Ulaanbaatar on Saturday. The statement condemned Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development in the strongest terms and called on the international community to thoroughly follow through with the UN Security Council resolution against the regime. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Monday that a spokesperson at the North's foreign ministry said that while the statement refers to Pyongyang's nuclear program as a threat to peace, the U.S. is the one destroying peace and security. The spokesperson also criticized the plan to deploy the U.S. missile defense system THAAD to South Korea. Using a similar tone, North Korea also slammed the high-level trilateral meeting between South Korea, the U.S. and Japan in Hawaii last week, again focusing its criticism on Washington and saying the meeting shows how the U.S. is trying to realize its long-time ambitions of military dominance over the region and the world. In the meantime, on the sanctions front, the pressure on Pyongyang is increasing. According to Radio Free Asia on Monday, France's report on its implementation of the UN Security Council sanctions has been recently reviewed by the Council and will soon be made public. In the 7-page-long report, Paris has reportedly expressed its commitment to abide by UN Security Council Resolution 2270 as well as the EU sanctions. It also said that it has not shipped military supplies to the north in 4 years and has added 3 individuals to its blacklist. Kwon-swa, Arirang News.
South Korea and the United States have unveiled plans to reassure South Koreans that the soon-to-be-deployed THAAD missile defense system on the peninsula does not pose any risk to human health or the environment. On Monday, the U.S. will allow South Korean media to tour the U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD, currently dispatched in Guam. This is the first time South Korean reporters will be given access to Andersen Air Force Base, where the Alpha battery was set up in 2013 to counter North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile threats. The reporters will be briefed on the electromagnetic waves generated by the system's radar, as well as the noise levels and its impact on the surrounding environment. The top policymakers from the country's 3 main parties met with Finance Minister Lee Il-ho today to discuss the proposed budget supplement worth some $8.8 billion. The government said the budget bill should be passed within a certain time frame, or it may not have the intended so-called pump priming effect on the economy. The budget supplement was initiated to shore up the Korean economy, which has been suffering from waning exports and sluggish domestic demand. It aims to support the government's corporate restructuring drive for ailing industries, especially the shipbuilding sector, and boost job creation efforts. The international community is urging Turkey's president to refrain from using last week's coup attempt as an excuse to launch a bloody crackdown on his political enemies. Several thousand people, including military personnel and judges, have already been thrown in jail. Hwang Ho-jun has the latest.
Around 6,000 people have been arrested since Friday's coup attempt, and government officials are saying the plotters will be tried for treason. Addressing his supporters in a speech broadcast on national TV, Turkey's president called for the reinstatement of the death penalty, saying there should be no delay.
My brothers, as the state and the government, we hear your demand. We cannot ignore this demand. In democracy, whatever people say, it is done.
Turkey abolished the death penalty in 2004. Erdogan is also demanding the U.S. extradite Fethullah Gulen, an Islamic cleric currently living in Pennsylvania in a self-imposed exile for more than a decade, whom he believes is the mastermind behind the coup attempt. With the possibility of a political bloodbath looming, the international community is urging Turkey to keep calm and protect the rule of law and democracy. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Now, 3 police officers have been shot dead in the U.S. state of Louisiana. Officers say they don't yet know the motive for the shooting, nor whether there's any connection to the shooting by police of an African-American man earlier this month. Kim Il-gun has the details.
2 of the dead were Baton Rouge police officers, the other an East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office deputy. One of the injured is said to be in critical condition. The African-American gunman killed in the shootout has been identified as 29-year-old Gavin Eugene Long of Kansas City. He was armed with an assault rifle and wearing a mask and black fatigues. Officials say Long is believed to have been the only gunman, despite earlier reports saying 2 others were still at large. The shootings occurred on Sunday at around 9 a.m. local time, less than 2 kilometers from the Baton Rouge Police Department headquarters, where hundreds were arrested earlier this month while protesting the death of Alton Sterling. Sterling was shot dead by law enforcement officers on July 5th. His death has sharply heightened racial tensions in Baton Rouge. Officials say the motive for Sunday's shootings is unclear. The governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, said the gunman committed an unspeakable attack, adding that the hatred has got to stop. President Obama condemned the murders, calling the attack cowardly and reprehensible. Obama pledged his full support to the Baton Rouge Police Department and promised that justice will be done. Kim Il-gun, Arirang News.
Now, more Korean investors are keeping their money in short-term deposits amid the ongoing global uncertainties. The Bank of Korea and the Korea Financial Investment Association said Monday that Korea's short-term floating funds hit an all-time high of 959 trillion won. That is around $843 billion as of May. This is a $13 billion increase from April and an $82 billion increase from the same month last year. News comes despite the central bank's efforts to bolster liquidity by lowering interest rates. Experts say Korean investors are unwilling to make long-term investments and prefer to hold their funds in cash or in demand deposits and savings deposits. The country's short-term floating funds have grown from $474 billion in 2008 to $820 billion by the end of 2015, an average annual growth of $49 billion. Volkswagen and Suzuki CMC have been ordered to recall hundreds of cars and vehicles here in Korea. Seoul's land ministry says Volkswagen is recalling around 1,300 vehicles from 4 different models, including the popular Tiguan model. Now, these models in question have defective child locks, which is the device that prevents young passengers opening the back doors. Suzuki is recalling over 500 motorcycles from 9 different models due to engine defects. Owners of vehicles or motorbikes subject to the recall can take them in for free repairs at their local service centres. Now, waistlines are widening here in Korea. It turns out a growing number of Koreans are piling on the pounds from frequent meals out and too much greasy food. The NH Livestock Economy Research Centre says more than 31% of Koreans over the age of 19 are now classified as overweight. That's up more than 1 percentage point since around the turn of the century. The report says Koreans are now eating more saturated fat than they were a decade or so ago. Experts say Koreans are consuming more Chinese and Western cuisine and choosing to dine out more than they used to. Now, in sports news, Korean-born New Zealander Lydia Ko has yet another LPGA title under her belt, winning the Marathon Classic in Ohio. The world number one closed with a 2-under 69 at Highland Meadows to finish at 14 under, with Korea's Mirim Lee and Thailand's Arya Jutan Agan. After the regulation 72 holes, Ko went on to win, sinking the decisive putt in a 4-hole playoff to seal her 4th LPGA Tour victory of the season. With the win, the 19-year-old retains her #1 ranking and remains on top of the LPGA Tour money list with over $2.2 million. And that is where we are going to leave it on this Monday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for watching, and we'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.